All right. Is it working? Yeah, it's working. Hello, Zoom. And hello to everybody who took the extra effort to come out in, what do the kids call it? IRL, right? Right, am I right? In real life, that's right, IRL, so that's how the kids call it in real life. So thank you for coming out. To those who came out, thank you to the Zoom people, and also thank you to those who came out IRL in real life. So I heard a joke actually from Vladimir Putin. I mean, I didn't hear it from him directly, told the joke. And I don't hang out with Putin, but he told you there was the Moscow Energy Summit, 2017. And there was a panel of all types of world leaders. And Putin was one of the world leaders on the panel. And for whatever reason, everybody kept directing their questions to Putin. Every question was to him. He was getting tired of it, like, why are all the questions to me? So they asked him another question. He says, can I tell a joke? And of course, you know, nobody said no. No one wants to tell Putin, no. I'll tell a joke. So he said, can I tell a joke? So he says, there was a soldier in the Israeli army. And the general comes to review the troops. And the general asks the soldier in the Israeli army, soldier, if you see 20 terrorists coming at you, what are you going to do? And the Israeli soldier says, I take out my Uzi and I shoot them. So the general says, soldier, if a tank is coming at you, what do you do? He says, I take out my rocket launcher. Shoot my rocket launcher to defend myself. The general says, very good. Soldier, what do you do if there's 20 terrorists, a tank, and planes coming at you? What do you do? Soldier says, General, am I the only one in this army? Putin says, am I the only one answering questions? At any rate, there's something very Jewish about that joke. I don't know where Putin, or maybe you heard it from Rabbi Lazar or something. We'll find out later. Find out Shabbos. But there's something very Jewish about that joke. There's tonight's topic is a question, but do I matter? That's a universal question that human beings have asked throughout the ages, do I matter? And the Jewish answer to that question, like any Jewish answer to any question, that's very good. It's a Jewish crowd over here. That's right. The Jewish, did everyone hear what he said? The Jewish answer to any question is another question. That's right. So the question is, but do I matter? And the answer to the Jewish answer to the question is another question, which in the words of our sages is formulated as Lama Nivra Ha'adam Yechid. Why was the first human being created alone? It wasn't even that there was a man and a woman at first. That was later. In fact, God said it's not good that the Adam, the earthling, be alone. He split them into two. So obviously God wanted there to be two later, and then many more than two. They were fruitful and they multiplied, and then we have all of humanity. But at first there was just one. And why did God create it as one if he knew there were going to be many? And our sages say to teach us that every individual is a world. So not only at the beginning of time, there was one human being who was the entire world, but even now, even today, every single one of us is a world. And what we're talking about is the attitude of what we call Bishvili Nivra Ha'elam. The world was created for my sake. But that is not an attitude of entitlement, God forbid, but quite the opposite. It is a perspective of obligation, duty, that the world is here for me to fix. Nobody else. Like Truman during World War II had a sign on his desk, the buck stops here, right? Everyone's passing the buck. Truman had a sign on his desk, the buck stops here. So according to Jewish thinking, every single individual in the world is supposed to have a sign that says the buck stops here. And that was really the message of the Rebbe. The Rebbe began to lead at a time when the Jewish world was in a state of absolute desolation. And the Rebbe rebuilt the Jewish world by rebuilding individuals. That's really, if I could say the whole talk in a sentence, I would say, do you matter? Oh yeah, you matter. Not only do you matter as an individual, but from the perspective of Torah, from the perspective of Chassidus, the whole world is waiting for you to rise to the occasion and to fulfill the purpose for which you were created. You matter to the whole world. The entire cosmic plan depends on you. There was once a little boy whose father had a home office. The father was a workaholic. It wasn't enough that he worked 80 hours a week at the office. When he would come home, he'd work as well. And this little 5-year-old boy wanted to play with his father, so he goes into his father's home office and says, Daddy, let's play. Father didn't want to be distracted, so he was looking for something to brush the kid off. He looked around. He saw on his desk there was a magazine. Cover the magazine, there was a picture of the world, like a globe, map of the world, with different countries, and borders, and everything. So the father got an idea. He took the cover of the magazine, carefully tore it off. Then he took this picture of the world, started tearing it. He tore it into 100 little pieces, like confetti. And then he took all these torn up pieces of this picture of the globe. He took the heap of torn up paper and he put it in the little boy's hands. He said, there you go, a puzzle. Put together the puzzle and then Daddy will come play with you. Now this is a little 5-year-old kid. He doesn't know what the world looks like. He doesn't know the shapes of the continents, let alone of different countries. So the father figures it'll take him a good long while to complete the puzzle. Little boy leaves the room, goes to the big table out in the dining room, and 10 minutes later, he runs back excitedly. He says, Daddy, come look, I'm not finished. Father's like, it's not possible. He says, come. Father follows his little son, beaming with pride, and he shows him, look, Daddy, I did it. He looks at the dining room table. There it is, the magazine cover, completely reassembled with a picture of the entire world, all of its contours and all of its shapes, everything, perfectly. So the father says to the little boy, how did you do this? So the little boy says, look, I don't know what the world looks like. That's true. But you know how a magazine cover works. On the cover, there's a picture, but then there's the inside cover, right? That's the ad space. The advertisers pay top dollar for the inside cover, full page ad. So the little boy says, on the other side of the page, there was a picture of a man. So I don't know what the world looks like, but I know what a man looks like. So you see my trick, Daddy? And he picked up one of the pieces and he flipped it over. And he says, see, on the back of each piece is a picture of a man. And that was my trick. That's what I did. You see, Daddy, if you put the man together, then the whole world falls into place. That's not just an inspiring thought. That's a truth. That's a reality. That if you want to heal the cosmos, if you want to perfect the entire world, look within. Look within. Because every single person is here for a mission that is unprecedented, that no soul ever came to the world before to do, and no soul will ever come to the world after. Your place in history, the timing at which this mother, this father gave birth to this child in this place, to live this many hours and minutes and years and seconds, this is for a unique purpose. There's a famous Hasidic story about one of the students of the great Maggid, who was the student of the Baal Shem Tov, named Reb Zushya. Reb Zushya was on his deathbed and he was crying. The students were gathered around and he said, Rebbe, why are you crying? He says, I'm afraid of judgment. He said, Rebbe, you lived a life of perfect piety. How can you be afraid of judgment? So Zushya says, you think I'm afraid that I'm going to come up to the heavenly court and they're going to demand from Zushya, why weren't you like Abraham, our father? You think I'm afraid they're going to demand from me, Zushya, why weren't you like Moses, our teacher? He says, no, I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid I'm going to get up there to the heavenly court. They're going to look at my life. They're going to look at me and they're going to say, Zushya, why weren't you Zushya? So came the Rebbe at a time when the Jewish world was completely devastated. Our entire future was hanging in the balance. We're talking about in the years as the horrors of the Holocaust became known. And the Rebbe sought to rebuild the world, and not just the Jewish world, I say the entire world, because from the first day, the Rebbe made it clear that our agenda is to bring healing to the entire world, all of humanity, bring Mashiach, which is universal peace for everyone. And the way that the Rebbe set about accomplishing this gargantuan task was by focusing on individuals. And why is that? Because you are the world. You are the world. I'll tell you a story that I did not hear directly from the person it happened to because I was too much of a chicken. I'll tell you what happened. Actually, Rabbi Yoel Khan told a story. And one of my friends, who was a little bit crazier than me, went and he hunted down the people that it happened to. 3 a.m, visiting Crown Heights from Australia. He got the story directly. So this is how I know the story. I got it directly from him. But anyway, I'll tell you the story. There was an Israeli couple, and they were both academics. They're both professors. And I think Michael was a professor of statistics, and Atara was a professor of psychology. And they ended up moving as far away from Judaism as they could. They both grew up extremely staunchly secular. They were both kibbutzniks from Shomer HaTzair kibbutz. And they moved to Hobart, Tasmania. Hobart, Tasmania is, I mean, if you think Australia is far, Tasmania is even farther. So they moved to Hobart, and they definitely did not look to see if there was a Jewish community before. In fact, that was kind of the point, away from Jewish community. And when they arrived, they were met by a contingency of the Jewish community. The entire Jewish community of Hobart, standing in their living room with about 20 people. They had a community center, and they used to get together and have prayers, and they asked the Hasofer, that was their family name, Hasofer family, to join the community center, and they said they really have no interest even in participating in that. So they left it alone. But a couple of years later, they showed up, and they told Michael, they told him, you're the new rabbi. He says, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not religious, I'm none of that stuff, I don't qualify. So they said, no, you do, because you're Israeli, so you speak Hebrew, and we need somebody who can read the Torah, and you're the only one who reads Hebrew. So he discussed it with his wife, and he says, well, I have really no interest in this. We have no interest in this stuff. But to be good neighbors, we'll do it. So he agreed to be a good neighbor, and he would go to the Jewish Community Center on Shabbat, and he would read the Torah. At any rate, you know how this stuff works, right? It's like the gateway drug, right? They tell you, just try a little bit, right? You start getting into it, start getting into Yiddishkeit, and before they knew it, as much as they were staunchly against it, it started to grow on them. Now, at first, here was their excuse. they said, well, we don't believe in this. We're atheists. But we want our children to have a Jewish identity. And if we were in Israel, then our children's Jewish identity would be that they're Israeli. But if we're in Hobart, Tasmania, so they need some type of Jewish identity, so we'll give them a cultural identity. But we don't believe a word of it. We don't believe a word of it. There's nothing holy about it. There's nothing divine, but it's Jewish culture, so we'll start to observe it in the home. So they started Friday night, they made Kiddush, and that was like a little bit, like I said, this stuff, you don't plan for it to, it's like an app you install and it takes over the operating system. When a Jew starts dabbling in Yiddishkeit, sooner or later, starts to grow on him. And after a while, never, that was it. They really believed in this stuff. And they said, you know what, this is real. This stuff is real. I mean, it took them a few years, but this stuff is real. So they learned everything they could learn. But remember, this is before the internet. We have a hard time remembering how isolated we were. Remember when you wanted to know information and you couldn't just Google it, find it within a second. So they basically read all the Jewish books they could, and they wanted to live Jewishly. And they just kept looking for more information. There was nothing. There was nothing. And so one night, Atara was in the kitchen, and she was distraught. And when she told the story to my friend, he told me, he says, when she told it to me, she said, listen to what I'm telling you, that I was screaming at the top of my lungs. She said, I was pointing in a chumash, and I was saying to my husband, you see, every time that the Jewish people need something, they speak to Moshe. This story is a story about Moshe. The Jewish people need anything, they go to Moshe. Okay, if this is supposed to be real, if we're supposed to do this now, I want to know, where is Moshe? She starts screaming, where is Moshe? Where is Moshe? There has to be Moshe. If we're supposed to be able to keep this today, there has to be Moshe today. And she was screaming at the top of her lungs. And she says, God, if this is real, we need instruction. Send your shepherd and teach us Torah. The next day, Michael goes to the community center where he's rabbi, and he sees something he never saw before in Hobart. He sees a religious Jew in full Hasidic garb, beard, tzitzis, yarmulke. He was totally shocked. This is what my wife was praying for in the kitchen last night. He says, who are you? He says, I'm Rabbi Gutnick from Melbourne. He says, come with me. You're coming to my house. Chaim Gutnick from Melbourne shows up out of nowhere at the Jewish Community Center in Hobart, Tasmania. Michael brings him home, and they start asking him every single question, all their questions, and he sees how thirsty they are. He establishes a rapport with them. He says, communicate, we go back and forth. And after he went back to Melbourne, they stayed in touch. But then eventually, their appetite was so insatiable, they moved to Melbourne. And so they left Hobart, and they went to Melbourne, and they became part of the community in Melbourne, which is very, Baruch Hashem, very robust Jewish community. And their children went to the Jewish schools. And a few years after they moved there, a number of years actually, because their daughter was already in high school. The children were young when they were in Hobart. So the daughter was in high school, and she was speaking to Chaim Gutnick's daughter, Nina, who's now Mrs. Feldman in Sydney. And the little Hasofer girl mentioned, you know, before we moved here to Melbourne, we used to live in Hobart, Tasmania. And the little Gutnick girl, the rabbi's daughter, says, oh, Hobart, I've heard of Hobart before. I've heard of Hobart. I remember a bunch of years ago, it was a little girl and we got a telegram from the Rebbe. And it said, you're not only responsible for the big cities in Australia, you're also responsible for Jews in outlying areas and far-flung areas like Hobart, Tasmania. My father got this telegram, Hobart, Tasmania. He knew a telegram from the Rebbe is not mere words. It's a call to action. And the very next day, he was in Hobart, and he showed up. He didn't even know who he was looking for. He just asked somebody, where do the Jews hang out? They said, oh, there's some Jewish center over there. Rabbi Gutnick shows up at the Jewish Community Center in Hobart. And who's there but Michael Hasofer, whose wife had just been praying the night before in her kitchen. If this is real, where is Moshe? Where is our shepherd? A Jewish mother is crying in a kitchen in Hobart, Tasmania. And don't ask me how it works. Don't ask me about Ruach HaKodesh or any of that stuff that's above my pay grade. I don't know. But somehow, the Lubavitcher Rebbe sits in an office in Brooklyn, New York, and sends a telegram to his shliach in Melbourne. You better get yourself over to Hobart right away. The Rebbe is overseeing a massive operation. Remember, we're talking about shluchim all over the world. And what's he worrying about? That some Jewish mother in Hobart is crying right now that she wants to learn Torah and she doesn't know how. You know, people ask, you know, how do you describe the Rebbe? Is the Rebbe a great man? Use such words, a great man. The Rebbe was a godly man. You know what godly means? Godly means infinite. And when I say infinite, I want to explain what I mean by it. Because I think infinite is a term that's often misunderstood. There's a joke. There was once a guy who says to God, he says, God, I heard that for you, a second, 1,000,000 years is like a second. So he's like, yeah. He says, God, I heard for you that $1,000,000 is like a penny. God's like, yeah. God's like, so could I have a penny? God's like, yeah, 1 second. So we think of infinity as this massive, endlessly massive concept that's so giant, it's so big, like nothing's too big. That's infinity. But that's only half of infinity, which mathematically, I'm not sure if that's infinite at all. Infinity isn't just something for which there's nothing too big. The other side of infinity is that there's nothing too small. So infinity is a perspective from which every galaxy is like a grain of sand, but every grain of sand is like a galaxy. So when I think of the Rebbe's care for the individual and the Rebbe's focus on the potential of every individual, to be able to see how a person isn't just an important part of the world. A person is a world. That's a perspective that comes from infinity. And what I want to explain to you is that not only did the Rebbe look at people that way, but the miracle to me is that the Rebbe got us to look at people. That's the miracle. Tell me the Lubavitcher Rebbe valued every individual like a world. Okay, that's the Rebbe. How did he get us to see people that way? I mean, I remember as a bacher, okay, I'm a little bit more settled, a little bit more normal now. My wife forces me, not her. But, you know, when I was a yeshiva bacher, I remember us Friday afternoons, you know, they would close the light in yeshiva. They would kick us all out of the yeshiva. They would close the books, that's it. You go out there on the streets, you hit the pavement, and you find people, excuse me, sir, are you Jewish? You put on the phone, excuse me, ma'am, are you Jewish? You give the Shabbos candle. And, you know, I remember my spot was in front of Columbia University before there was a yeshiva. And I used to stand there, and I used to, excuse me, sir, are you Jewish? Excuse me, ma'am, are you Jewish? 1,000 people, 2,000 people, every Friday afternoon. And I remember that excitement, that passion that we used to have. One more Jew, just one more Jew. You already took up your precious time. You got on the subway. You went all the way to Manhattan. You're standing there. You know, you think it's so comfortable. It's not comfortable. It's as embarrassing as it looks. Okay? You go, it's cringy. You go over to a stranger. Excuse me, trust me, it takes the first 10,000 times to get over. Excuse me, sir, you're Jewish. And we really, really had this feeling that how can I leave? How can I get back on the subway if I could put on film with one more Jew? As if the whole world depended on it. So to me, to say that Rebbe looked at it that way, that infinite view, that nothing is too small, nothing's insignificant, that everything matters. Okay, that's the Rebbe. The Rebbe got us to look at it that way. That blows my mind up. I'll tell you a story. Happened to a friend of mine. Wish it happened to me. Should have told you what happened. You with them. But guys can loosen up. You guys should have told another joke. Loosen you up. Seems like you guys are nervous. What? Was the mic on? Laughed at the penny joke. It's a story of a friend of mine. He even this, as I'm saying it out loud, I realize how wild it is. The yeshiva bacher has the summer off from yeshiva. What did he? He and his buddy went on a summer program to be roving rabbis. Like they took their time off and they went to Alaska. This is back in the 90s. And they were going to small communities that were, you know, there's Chabad in Anchorage, but then there's communities that are so small they don't have Chabad. So my friend Avrami, his friend Levi, would go to Alaska for the summer. And they got a list of places where there's a few Jews here, Jews there, people that had been in touch with Chabad, or sometimes just people with Jewish names, phone book. And he was looking for Jews, individual Jews here, there. And it was the last day of the summer. He's got his flight back, Anchorage to Seattle, Seattle to LA, LA. And he figures out there's one more town that we didn't visit yet. Homer, Alaska. And Homer, Alaska has one Jew. And it's like 2 hours away and 2 hours back. And our flight is in however many hours. So they figured it out. If we race to Homer and we find that one Jew, we can have like 2 minutes talking to her, and then we'll drive back, and then Anchorage to Seattle, Seattle to LA. So they go to Homer, and they're asking where this woman is. They have this name, this Jewish woman, Homer, Alaska. And they say, well, she's a school teacher. Okay, where is she? She's in school, she's teaching. Where's the school? Well, so, you know, it's a small town, just in the middle of town. Which school? There's only one school. So they go to the school, and they, Mrs. So-and-so here? Yeah, she's here. She comes out of class, she comes out of the office. So Rebbe's talking to her, and she's telling him her story. And she says, I actually come to New York. I was young, I was wandering, ended up on the West Coast, and there, went up to Alaska. met this guy, this Eskimo, native there from Alaska. He got married, had a daughter. And Rami says, hold on, so you have a daughter? She says, yeah. He says, so there's not one Jew in Homer. There are two Jews, you and your daughter. He says, yeah. He says, where's your daughter? She says, in school. He says, which school? She says, there's only one school. He said, can we talk to her? Sure, no problem. So the mother, goes back to her classroom and gets the daughter to come down to the office. Now, Rami is looking at the watch and saying, okay, we got to get out of here. You know, we got to catch our plane. Anchorage to Seattle, Seattle to LA, LA to New York. We got to get out of here. So he's thinking, I got 1 minute. Let's say I got 1 minute. And this little girl from Homer, Alaska, she has no clue. She may not even know she's Jewish. I got to tell her everything. I got 60 seconds to tell her the one and only Jewish message of her life, quite possible. And before he knows it, the girl, little 6-year-old girl, standing in front of him. And he's got to say something. He has no clue what he's supposed to say to make it count. So, you know, just the muscle memory kicks in. He reaches into his bag and pulls out the tea lights, little Shabbos candles, with the Shabbos candle lighting guide, you know, the paper with times on it. And now he's holding, these are his props. Now he's holding it. And he shows it to her. He says, you know what this is? She says, it's a candle. He says, yeah, but you know what kind of candle? She says, no. He says, it's a Shabbos candle. Now he's got 50 seconds left. He's going Shabbos. So he says, God created the world in 6 days. And on the 7th day, he rested. And every single week on the 7th day, which is Friday night and Saturday, is the holy day of rest again. And at that time, as the sun begins to set before the day of rest, Jewish women and girls light candles to usher in this day of rest. Now, the sun, the world is a globe. The sun sets not all at once in all places. First place where it becomes sundown on Friday afternoon in the whole world. First place where there are Jews, at least, is, you know, in the Far East. Then in Australia, right? One by one, the sun sets, and he's describing it to this girl. He says, God is watching this, and he's watching the whole world. And he sees in each place where Jewish women and girls are lighting Shabbos candles, he sees these little lights light up. You know, so waits and there's some lights, a few lights in Japan, a few lights in China. Oh, there's a bunch of lights in Australia. Oh, no, South Africa, a bunch of lights. Oh, Israel, millions of lights. Then across Europe, lights here, lights there. England, there's lights. And the sun setting over the Atlantic. It's quiet for a while. Then the sun setting on the East Coast. Oh, New York. Again, bright lights. The sun sets over Florida, and it sets over Chicago, and it sets over California. And one by one, all these different places sort of light up on the map. And God, the creator of it all, he's watching this, all these lights. And he's watching. And he's waiting patiently for the last light in the whole world to be lit. The last place where the sun sets, the latest Shabbos in all of the world, where there is a Jewish girl there to light the Shabbos. Farthest west, Alaska's west, it's also north, so summer, candlelighting time is very, very, very long. Really, literally the last place on earth. Homer was even further west than Anchorage. My friend Avrami says to this little 6-year-old girl, he says, the creator is watching all the lights lighting up across the whole world. watches each one, but he waits until the last light in the last spot on earth is lit by the last Jewish girl in the last place where Shabbos comes in on the whole earth. And you know who that little girl is? That little girl is you. He handed her Shabbos kit. That was it. Back to the airport, Anchorage, Seattle, LA, New York. You want to heal the world. You want peace for all humanity. It starts with one simple premise, that every single individual is infinite. And that the creator of heaven and earth waits and watches every individual. This wasn't just the Rebbe's perspective. This was the perspective that the Rebbe taught a generation. And I'll tell you, now I was at a Shabbaton this past Shabbos in the Poconos. They did the thing, Sea Kids. I don't know if they have it over here, but Sea Kids is a group where the kids have activities. One of the things they do is, these are kids mostly from non-observant homes. They have a little kidon, they have a contest where they take the Jew Q. Jew Q is this Jewish literacy course, and then at the end they have a tournament to see who learned the most answers, like what are the 3 prayers, 2 prayers, those kinds of questions. Anyway, so I was at the Shabbaton with the kids who were competing in the Jew Q, and their parents were there, and all these parents were from non-observant families. And they had encouraged their children to be part of this program, which was beautiful to see. And then the children in turn encouraged the parents to come to the Shabbaton. So while they were doing programs for the kids, they had to stump the rabbi. So stump the rabbi means every question is good. So I was doing stump the rabbi with the Sea Kids parents, and one of the fathers asks me, when is Lubavitch getting a new Rebbe? So I said, okay, so first of all, it's a very fair question to ask, because historically the precedent is when the Rebbe passes away, there's a successor. So when there's an exception, when something happens that's not like the rule, you wonder, why is something happening differently? So I said, I'll give you the short answer. Short answer first. Short answer is, Lubavitcher Rebbe most certainly appointed a successor. It's time for you to get to work. Then I gave him the long answer. I told him like this. Parshas Kairach. You knew you weren't going to get away with a rabbi getting up to a podium in a shul and not say the Torah on Parsha. You knew it was going to happen. Parshas Kairach. Kairach was Moshe's cousin. He came to Moshe and complained. He said, why did you give the high priesthood to your brother Aaron? He wanted to democratize the priesthood. He said, you should all be high priests. And Rashi says something very interesting. When Moshe's answer to Kairach is, he challenges him to this priestly duel, basically, he says at dawn, we're gonna duel. And you're gonna bring out, the high priest had this pan, incense. We're all gonna bring it out, and you're gonna see whoever's the real high priest. And then whoever's not the high priest is gonna drop dead. And first of all, it's crazy. What did they think? Why did they take up this challenge? But Rashi explains that what Moshe was saying, Rashi's based on the Medrash over there, is Moshe is saying to them, listen, guys, I totally sympathize. The wording is, I also like this. He validates the whole thing. He's like, guys, I would also like it. But halachically, we have one high priest. There's one guy who can enter the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur and do the other. This is the way they work. But I totally sympathize with the aspiration. So what's up with it? What if it's so wrong? Then why is Moshe validating the aspiration? And if Moshe is validating the aspiration, why is it wrong? Follow what I'm saying. So this is not my question, by the way. Where did I get this? This is from a city. This is from one of the Rebbe's talks. The Rebbe asked this question. And the short answer, the Rebbe says that, to quote Golda Meir, when Richard Nixon, during the Yom Kippur War, so he was saying to her, how can you have so much chutzpah? You're making demands of me. I'm from a big country. You're from a little country. You're dependent on us. So Nixon told Golda Meir at one point, says, I'm the president of 200 million citizens. At that time, the US population. I'm the president of 200 million citizens. So Golda says, I'm the prime minister of 4 million prime ministers. You come here and deal with the Jews, right? I'm prime minister of 4 million prime ministers. So the Rebbe basically says that the Jewish people are a nation of prime ministers. Before the Torah was given, bring me more water. Made a bracha before. Okay, excellent. Now I can go another hour. Just joking. Before the Torah was given, one of the things that Moshe is told by Hashem to prepare the Jewish people tells them, that you should be to me a nation of priests. And the Baal HaTurim is one of the classical commentaries on the Chumash, says, you should be for me a nation of priests, means you should be a nation of high priests. Now the Baal HaTurim is homiletic, it's drush, it's not pshat, and it's not halacha. So halachically, obviously, there's one person who has that job called high priest. But on a spiritual level, every single Jew is a high priest. So Moshe was validating that complaint and saying, look, technically, we have one high priest. But spiritually, I totally get it that you feel that you are the top dog, that you are number one. You know why? Because that's the truth. You really are. You're the leader. Every single one of you. We're a nation of high priests. I'll tell you my favorite Yechidus story. Yechidus is one-on-one meeting audience with the Rebbe. My favorite Yechidus story. First, I'll tell you the punchline. Freddie Hager, Ephraim Hager, who was a businessman from Golders Green, London. He was very successful in business. He was chairman of the London Diamond Horse. Anyways, he came out of Yechidus, came out of his one-on-one meeting with the Rebbe. He said, the Chassidim prepared me all wrong. I went into the Rebbe thinking that I was going to meet a great man, and I left realizing that I had met my true self. That's the punchline of the story. What does it mean? I met my true self. So I'll tell you the lead up to the story. Freddie Hager was like 22 years old. And he goes into the Rebbe, I think it was 3 in the morning. The Rebbe used to meet people all night. And they discussed a bunch of things, but at one point the Rebbe asked him, based on his last name, his family name, Hager, his surname, he asked him if he's related to a certain Hasidic guidance. And he said yes, and in fact he'd been carrying in his wallet a photograph of a grandfather, maybe great-grandfather who'd been a Hasidic back in Europe. Freddie was from England. This grandfather was from Romania, Europe. And he was a Rebbe. His grandfather was a Hasidic Rebbe. So he pulled out the photograph, and the Rebbe was very interested in the photograph. The Rebbe asked, can I have it? The Rebbe was looking at the photo, and here's this young man, like 22-year-old college kid, and the Rebbe is holding up this photo of his grandfather who had been a Hasidic Rebbe. The Rebbe is looking at them side by side. Now, imagine First of all, just imagine you're in the Rebbe's room and the Rebbe's like sizing you up, like staring at you. But now you have a grandfather who was a Hasidic Rebbe back in Europe, and the Rebbe's looking at a photograph of him and comparing it side by side next to you. Like, what's the Rebbe thinking over here? Back and forth. Finally, the Rebbe put the picture away in his desk drawer. And the Rebbe asked him in Yiddish. He had been speaking in English, but at this point, for whatever reason, the Rebbe switched to Yiddish. The Rebbe said, "Was is a Rebbe?" Freddie had, "What's a Rebbe?" Freddie had no idea. He didn't know the answer. So the Rebbe asked him a second time, "Was is a Rebbe?" No answer. Third time, "Was is a Rebbe?" No answer. Finally, the Rebbe answered. The Rebbe answered in Yiddish. The Rebbe said, "The Erste Rebbe is given the Baal Shem Tov. The first Hasidic Rebbe was the Baal Shem Tov. Als Hasidic had by sich in Stove, everything he had in his home, but the Rebbe gave him every Nacht by like sich schlaf. Give it away on a daily basis. Give it away. But that's a Rebbe. That's a Rebbe. After, you'll still be a Rebbe. Maybe you want to become. Now, I told you in the beginning of the story that Freddie Hager was a businessman. Very successful businessman, gave a lot of tzedakah, very prominent. So I'll ask you a question. Did he follow the Rebbe's advice? Did he become a Rebbe? Well, it depends how you define a Rebbe. That's what the Rebbe defined it before he said it. The Rebbe asked him 3 times, "Was is a Rebbe?" Oh, you think a Rebbe, like a Hasidic Rebbe, like the guy with a long silk coat and fur hat, somebody follows him around, they collect pieces of paper, he runs a big table, and they put out a big kugel, and he takes a piece, and everyone jumps in and takes the rest. You think that's a Rebbe? That's one kind of a Rebbe. That's one kind of a Rebbe. But the Rebbe basically said, what's a Rebbe is like the Baal Shem Tov. Everything you have in your Jewish house, you give away on a daily basis. If you know Aleph, teach Aleph. If you know Aleph base, teach Aleph base. If you only know Aleph, don't teach Aleph base. You can't give away something you don't have, but if you do have it, you have to give it away. And that's a Rebbe. A Rebbe is somebody who's not content with his own spiritual growth. A Rebbe is someone who's concerned with everyone around him. And so Freddie Hager certainly became a Rebbe. Of course he was a Rebbe. I said he was chairman of the London Diamond Boards. That was his day job. But he was a Rebbe. Because the Lubavitcher Rebbe had Rebbes who were philanthropists and entrepreneurs and cab drivers and school teachers, but they were all Rebbes. And this is the way it was meant to be from the inception of the Jewish people. Atem tiyuli mamlechas kehanim, be from your nation of priests, like Baal Turim says, kehanim gedalim, high priests. Every single Jew is a high priest. Buck stops here. You are the leader of world Jewry. Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom, said a great line. He said that what did he say? Good leaders make followers, great leaders make leaders. Whatever made leaders. I would go even further. I would say that throughout history, we had plenty of Rebbes who made siddur. Lubavitcher Rebbe's first Rebbe in history who made Rebbes. And that's why I told the guy at the Sea Kids Shabbat, I said, who's Lubavitcher Rebbe's successor? I said, what? Get to work. And I'm being glib. I'm not being glib when I say this. The Rebbe used to give out dollars. Everyone, I'm sure you're familiar with that. By the way, what was the idea of giving out dollars? Why did the Rebbe give the dollars? What was the point? The Rebbe said, and I guess the Rebbe said, what the Rebbe said? Because when you take the dollar, now you become deputized, called shliach mitzvah, the emissary to do a mitzvah. So when you get the dollar, now you have to go give the tzedakah. So the minute you take the Rebbe's dollar, you're becoming a shliach. You're an emissary. You're like, you think you're going to come meet me and not get a job? You think you're not going to get put to work? You meet the Rebbe, you're going to get put to work. You're going to become deputized. You think it's just the official shluchim with one of the international convention? The Rebbe said every man, woman, and child is a shliach. And the Rebbe would always repeat, Talmud of Diktum, shliach shel adam k'meisa, mamash, that a person's emissary is as himself. So the Rebbe called everyone Rebbe. I'll tell you what happened one time at Dollars. It was right before the Rebbe's 90th birthday, a few weeks before the Rebbe's 90th birthday. There was a guy from Toronto, Gabriel Aram, who used to put out Lifestyles magazine. And they wanted to do a feature on the Rebbe for his 90th birthday. So this Aram, he waited in line, he got up to get his dollar, and I think Rabbi Krinsky is the one who introduced him and said, "This is Gabriel Aram, publisher, the editor, chief of Lifestyle magazine. And they're doing a story on the Rebbe for the Rebbe's 90th birthday." So Gabriel Aram says to the Rebbe, "What's the Rebbe's message to the world in anticipation of his 90th birthday?" So it's like a 30-second interaction. It's on video. You go Google it, watch it. So the Rebbe says, 90 is tzaddik. You know, in the Hebrew alphabet, every letter is a number. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3. Right? So 90, number 90 is the letter tzaddik. The Rebbe speaking them in English. 90 is tzaddik, and tzaddik means a righteous person, not just regular righteous person. Tzaddik, tzaddik like a Rebbe, like a holy man. Therefore, the lesson is that everyone can be a tzaddik. Like, Rebbe, I thought we were talking about you. No. You. Everyone can be a tzaddik. So that's interesting, by the way. Gabriel Aram says to the Rebbe, okay, but what's the Rebbe's message for the entire world, also beyond the Jewish world? So the Rebbe says, a message to the entire world, beyond the Jewish world, is that they can also each be a tzaddik, according to the 7 Noachide laws. That was Sunday dollars. Sunday dollars, the Rebbe is saying every single human being on this earth is a tzaddik, is a Rebbe. And I'll tell you which Sunday dollars that was. That was Chof Vav Adar, Hoshin Nun Beis. And the next day was Monday, Chof Zayin Adar, 27th day of Adar. And on that day, day after that, dollars, the Rebbe was at the Isle in Queens at the resting place of his father-in-law. The Rebbe suffered a stroke, debilitating stroke. And wasn't able to speak publicly after that time. So you want to ask me, the ethical will, the Rebbe's last message. It's pretty clear, it's public record. The last day that Rebbe spoke in public, the message was that every single human being on this earth, Jew and even non-Jew, is a tzaddik. That's what Freddie Hager meant when he said, they prepared me all wrong. I thought I was going to be a great man. I left realizing I had met my true self. You think the Rebbe is a great man? I don't know what George Washington is. I don't know about great men. I don't know about great men. The Rebbe was the one who allowed you to see your true self and to realize, who are you? The leader of world Jewry. Do you matter? Yeah, you are the whole world. You are the whole world. It all comes down to you. The creator of heaven and earth is watching you, and not some spooky, ominous way. No, the creator of heaven and earth is watching you with nachas, with pleasure, with pride. It's all about you. That was the message. That was the affirmation that the Rebbe gave to every single individual that he met. It's all about you. It comes down to you. I heard somebody say an expression recently that really resonated with me. He wasn't even saying it in this context, but I think it's appropriate. He called in the cavalry. Cavalry is not coming. We are the cavalry. We are the cavalry. You know, in the cowboy movies, when the fort would be under siege, and then like Gabby Hayes or whoever would come in and say, don't worry, they called in the cavalry. Waiting for someone to save you, some knight in shining armor? He's already here. She's already here. Here, and here, and here. The Rebbe said this from day one. It was never a secret. From the first address, from 1951, the first public address that Rebbe said, by the way, I know that a lot of people have big ideas about what a Rebbe is supposed to do, but my leadership is going to be different. Rebbe said overtly, explicitly from day one. You know what it is, though? When you get a new app on your phone, so it says, you accept terms and conditions. Just click here. And everyone, you ever read the terms and conditions? Just click, yeah, accept. I want it, right? So the Rebbe said, here are the terms and conditions of my leadership. If I'm going to be the leader, you're all going to work. You're all leaders. You're all responsible. And everyone's clicking, yeah, of course, sure. No. They didn't believe it. They didn't imagine what the Rebbe was thinking of. They didn't know what they were signing up for. The Rebbe wasn't joking. And then in 1991, Rebbe came out and said, I did everything that I could do. And at this point, the only thing left to bring Mashiach is that each one of you have to step up. It wasn't a surprise. The Rebbe said that from day one. Why did the Rebbe say that? Not out of frustration. Not because the Rebbe got fed up. If he was fed up, then why did he say it from the beginning, from day one? The Rebbe said it because that was always the truth. The truth was always going to be that each and every one of us is going to have to someday grow up and meet his or her true self and realize that the entire world is waiting for you. And they're not going to ask you, why weren't you like Abraham, our father? Why weren't you like Moses, our teacher? Zushya is afraid they're going to ask Zushya, why weren't you Zushya? Every single person in this room is the leader of world Jewry. Every single person in this world is greater than they think they are. How much greater? Infinitely greater. Whatever you think of yourself, multiply that by infinity. Now you're getting realistic. One of my favorite letters, the Igros. Rebbe wrote thousands of letters. Rebbe used to get more mail than the White House. And some of those correspondences are published in a collection called Igros Kodesh. One of my favorite Igros is a letter to a shliach in New Haven, Connecticut, named Moshe Yitzchak Hach. Why am I mentioning the name? You're going to see why I'm telling you the name. The shliach in New Haven, he had a school. And the school wasn't doing well. I mean, spiritually it was doing, but materially they were in debt. They couldn't fundraise, and it was getting pretty disastrous. And stress was too much. He wrote to the Rebbe, a panicked letter. He says he's quitting, he's giving up. I actually found out later, the Hach family told me that when Moshe Yitzchak Hach wrote to the Rebbe, he sent actually a parcel that had all the keys to the building. It wasn't just a resignation letter. He sent him the keys to the building. Anyways, he says, I can't go on. I can't do this. I'm done. So, I mean, you don't see his letter because that's not responses, but you can glean from the Rebbe's response. So the Rebbe writes back. It's a very short answer. It's from, I think, Tes Zion Thomas Tufshin Lam, summer of 1974. Anyway, so the Rebbe writes back to Moshe Yitzchak Hach, and he says, write that you can go on and need me, the Rebbe, to do everything. I guess that was a quote from Moshe Yitzchak Hach's letter. He said, he would have to do. So the Rebbe quoted a verse from the prophets. Before they call out, I've already replied. It means before you even prayed, your prayers are answered. It's basically what it means. Your prayers are answered. What else says? Your prayers are answered. I took care of it. And I sent Moshe Yitzchak Hecht to New Haven, Connecticut. Now, who's the Rebbe writing to in this letter? Moshe Yitzchak Hecht to New Haven, Connecticut. The Rebbe say, I heard your cry, I heard your plea. Don't worry, it didn't fall on deaf ears. I'm taking care of it. Moshe Yitzchak Hecht has been sent to New Haven. Now, maybe the Rebbe didn't forget who he's writing to, right? So then the Rebbe, it's so rich. The Rebbe continues, it says, but I can infer from the tone of this letter as well as the past letter. Like I said, I think they were like panicked letters. But it was like, I can infer from the tone of this letter and the past letter that his problem is, the Rebbe will write in third person. It's like an honorific. His problem, your problem, is that you don't know Moshe Yitzchak Hecht and the powers he possesses. Therefore, my advice to you is that you should meet the guy, and when you do, all of your problems will disappear. This was the Rebbe's advice to every one of us. Who are you waiting for? Who's supposed to swoop in and fix your problem? The Rebbe? No problem. Tag, you're the Rebbe. I have a friend, colleague, also I guess a mentor, quite a bit older than me, Rabbi Weinreb, from Muncie and from Yerushalayim, earlier from Maryland, so it's from Maryland. Anyways, he's got a great story. I heard it directed that he lived in Crown Heights for a few months. His wife, Chavi, she's from the Mujitzer dynasty, and they used to be based in Crown Heights. So when everyone knows Rabbi Weinberg from you, very respected, prominent figure. He edited Koren Shas, Steinfeld's Shas. Anyways, when he got married, they lived for a few months in Crown Heights. And he was at a Fabrengen. He said it wasn't even the whole Fabrengen. That was Fabrengen leading a public address. He went in, he heard the Rebbe speak from him. That was his entire relationship with them. At least as far as they moved to Maryland. He got a doctorate in psychology. He was practicing his license, he was practicing psychology, and he's also become a chacham. So he was very, very respected. He's a rabbi, he's a psychologist, and that was part of his problem because everyone came to him for solutions, for guidance. He was the chacham, he knows everything, right? Now, what's the problem? You're the guy that everyone comes to for guidance. Who do you go to? So Weinberg became very depressed. He told me, he said, I became depressed. He used the word depressed. It wasn't offhand. He meant it. He says, I was very depressed. So he says, I spoke to the smartest person. Not for advice, but for advice how to get advice. There was a Balchuva nuclear physicist, Toli Berg, and he was the smartest guy. He was a nuclear physicist. So I asked Reb Naftali, what should I do? I have questions about Judaism, about being a father, about being a husband. I have questions about Amunah, and I'm supposed to be Mr. Answer Guy. So who am I supposed to be? So Reb Naftali told him, you got to go to Lubavitcher Rebbe. So Rabbi Weinreb, he didn't know the whole protocol. He didn't understand that people were this back in the 60s where you could have gotten yichitz, could have gotten a private office. He didn't know the whole process, the whole procedure. He found out the number for 770. He called up. Somebody answered the phone. Hello. Beretto. Someone's asking in Yiddish, who's speaking? And he says, a Yid from Maryland, a Jew from Maryland, because he didn't want to say his name, because remember, his whole issue was that he was embarrassed. He was embarrassed. He did not want to reveal his name. He's supposed to be the answer guy. Now he's got questions, basic questions of Huna, faith, whatever. So he says, a Yid from Maryland, Jew from Maryland. Okay, was willst du fragen? What do you want to ask? So he said, I will fragen up frages and ask questions. So he started asking his questions. And the person on the phone was doing something very strange. Everything that Weinreb said, the guy on the other end, who we found out later was Rabbi Shais Taub, who was the Rebbe's chief secretary. everything Rabbi Weinreb was saying, Rabbi Hanukkah was repeating it out loud, like word for word. Very strange. At the end of the whole thing, we realized Rabbi Hanukkah was being like a human speakerphone. This is before speakerphone. And that Rabbi Hanukkah had answered the phone in the Rebbe's room. And he was repeating everything out loud so that the Rebbe could hear. He hears how did you figure all this out? Because he hears in the background Rebbe's voice. Now I told you, he'd been to a Fabrengen, so he knew what the Rebbe's voice sounded. So he hears in the background Rebbe say to Rabbi Hanukkah, Yes, as ruft from Malin, Zogen, a Sefarana Yid Malin mit dem soll reden, und heißt Weinreb. The Hanukkah says, the Rebbe says, since you're calling from Maryland, remember he introduced himself anonymous from Maryland. He says, since you're calling from Maryland, the Rebbe says, there's a Jew in Maryland you should speak. It's called Weinreb. Really. He's taken aback. He says, Aber ich bin der Weinreb, but I'm Weinreb. Wait a second. He hears like murmuring back, kind of like, doesn't know what to make of this whole thing. He hears the Rebbe say very calmly, if that is the case, it should be made known to him that sometimes you got to talk to yourself. That was the discussion. Pesci, Weinreb tells me that changed his whole situation. Because he realized what he was doing for everybody else, he could do it for himself. He had it. He says whenever he's confused and he's not sure, so he'll go learn the Rebbe's Sikha, learn some teachings of the Rebbe, and puts his thought on a higher plane. And it doesn't matter what the Sikha was talking about, that's irrelevant. But just learning the Rebbe's teachings just puts him in a different mode. And then he gets clarity. So the Rebbe was a different kind of Rebbe. Different altogether. Moshe Rabbeinu wanted this. He didn't actually get it. A couple of weeks ago, Parshas Vayeloscha says a couple of guys who became prophets, Eldad and Yeshua, Moshe's disciple, Joshua, came to him and he said, hey, there's a couple of guys competing for business. They opened up a shop down the street there. They hung up a shingle, profit. Should I get rid of them? Like Joshua was ready to bump them off. They're horning in on business. I'll get rid of them. And Moses told Joshua, he says, no, I wish that all of my people were like this. Now, eventually, that's going to come true. Because when Mashiach comes, the prophet tells us that no longer the Oid Yalamdu Ish Esre'ehu, no longer will one person have to teach another. Kikulam Yedu AC, because they will all know me, says Hashem. So eventually, we're all going to be prophets. We're all going to be high priests. We're all going to be privy to the secrets of the cosmos. That's the way it ends up. But Rebbe wanted that time come already. Rebbe wanted to hurry that up. And from everything I understand, one of the things that Rebbe did to hurry up that time where we're all going to know God, we're all going to be prophets, we're all going to be sages, is that Rebbe started treating us all like prophets and not sages. The Rebbe treated us all like Rebbes. The Rebbe's whole life was dedicated to making other people great. You ever heard of the first African-American female member of Congress? Shirley Chisholm, that's right. You know what district she represented? Crown Heights. And when she got to Washington, they were marginalizing her. And to make fun of her, they put her on the agricultural committee. In Congress, everything happens in committee. We think of like the whole Congress, floor of Congress, nothing happens. The big action is in the committees, and that's how you get powers through your committee. So to make fun of her, they took this young woman from inner city Brooklyn, and they put her on the agricultural committee as a farce. So she came back to Crown Heights, and she felt totally broken. And she had a meeting with the Rebbe. She went to 7-7. And she told the Rebbe, I thought I won a victory. I got elected, first African-American woman to be a member of the United States Congress. And I get there, and I can't even work because the old boys club. You put me on the agricultural committee. So the Rebbe tells her, by the way, how do we know this story? Because when Shirley Chisholm retired, she told this story at her retirement party. She says, I told the Rebbe, I feel totally broken. Like I arrived and now it's all nothing. Put me on the agricultural committee. The Rebbe says to her, what a wonderful gift you've been given. What an opportunity. There are children and pregnant and nursing mothers in your district and in other inner city districts who don't have food. And there are farmers in rural states who have a surplus. Maybe your position is an opportunity to serve your constituents and other people's constituents by making a shidduch, making a match between the farmers who have too much food and inner city children, mothers, and infants who don't have. She gets to Washington. First person she sees is Bob Dole, senator from Kansas. He introduces himself to her. Bob Dole, Kansas. Chisholm, New York. He says, what committee are you on? She said, agricultural committee. He says, I got to talk to you. All my voters, my constituents, are farmers. They have all this food surplus. They can't sell it. We got to come up with a solution for that. All of a sudden, she says, hold on, the rabbi. She says, I got an idea. And they started the WIC program. So at our retirement party, Shirley Chisholm says, if I accomplished anything in my career, it's because of the rabbi in Crown Heights who encouraged me when I was completely broken and told me to turn a crisis into an opportunity. I mentioned Jonathan Sacks before. How he said, good leaders make followers, great leaders make leaders that ever make leaders. Jonathan Sacks is case in point. How did Jonathan Sacks become chief rabbi? He wasn't even going to become a rabbi, let alone chief rabbi. He wrote to the Rebbe and asked, should I become an academic, a lawyer, or an economist? And the Rebbe wrote back to him, none of the above. Told him you should become a rabbi. And then later on, when he said, should I become, actually wrote to the Rebbe a letter, should I become chief rabbi of the United Kingdom? So what did the Rebbe do? The Rebbe used to do this a lot. Rebbe, Jonathan Sacks says, the Lubavitcher Rebbe changed my entire life without saying or writing a single word. I wrote to him a sentence. Should I become the next chief rabbi of the United Kingdom? So the Rebbe circled the should and circled the I and made arrows transposing them. Slashed out the crooked part of the question mark, left the dot as a period. Sent it back to him, and it now read, I should become the next chief rabbi. By the way, it's not just because the Rebbe was saying, hey, you understand there's a message. No, you're not the questioner, you're the answerer too. By the way, I learned that from the Rebbe. I don't know if people know about a column I used to write for Ami magazine. It's an advice column. People always used to say, oh, it's so interesting how you turn people's question into their answer. I say, I didn't make that up. That was the Rebbe's style. And why did the Rebbe do that? Because the Rebbe's whole message was, you're not confused. Talk to yourself. You know the answer. You're good. You're good. You got it. But the Jonathan Sacks story, it started when he was 20 years old. He was from Cambridge. He was studying in Cambridge. And he scammed a free trip to the United States. You know how he did it? He said, I'm going to go interview Jewish leaders about Jewish leadership. He wrote a grant, good writer, and he got the grant. And they paid for this kid to go, basically he just wanted to go sightseeing in America. Figured out a smart way to do it. So he got a grant to go interview Jewish leaders. He made sure to interview Jewish leaders all over, you know, Grand Canyon, whatever it is. He made a map of the United States. He interviewed all the Jewish leaders. He said on his way back, when he finished interviewing all the other leaders, the last leader he interviewed was Lubavitcher Rebbe in Brooklyn. He said, comes in, he starts interviewing the Rebbe. He's like, hold on a second, what happened? The Rebbe flipped the tables on me, he starts interviewing me. I'm asking the Rebbe about leadership, the Rebbe starts asking me about leadership. And the Rebbe says, what are you doing for the Jewish students at Cambridge? He says, I wasn't prepared for interrogating you. What am I doing? I'm just a student there. So he said, I started constructing this convoluted sentence to sort of weasel my way out of it. Well, in the situation in which I currently find myself, so evidently did something which I think is very uncharacteristic. He cut me off mid-sentence. And he said, we do not find ourselves in a situation. Now, what are you doing for the Jewish students? So Jonathan Sacks went to go interview leaders, to meet great men. And I'm sure the other leaders and great men that he interviewed obliged. Went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, nah, I'm more interested in you meeting yourself. I want you to meet yourself. Who's the leader? You're the leader. He took this kid, this self-concerned kid, and he built him into the chief rabbi. And that was the Rebbe's entire life. He's one by one revealing the greatness within each individual. And so he had the Rebbe Meir Rebbe, who was the chairman of the London Diamond Bourse, and the Rebbe Meir Rebbe, who was the chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, and the Rebbe Meir Rebbe, who was the first African-American female representative in Congress. Rebbe made the whole world into Rebbes. So you want to know who's going to come save us? Who's got the answers? It's you, and you, and you, and you. And there's no one else to look to. There's no one else to look to. You want to heal the world. You are the world. And there's no difference between activism and self-improvement. They're one and the same. And so becoming a better person, a better husband or wife, a father, a mother, a sibling, a co-worker, being a nicer, more courteous driver. I tell you, driving over here, it's coming from 5 towns. I had a lot of opportunities to practice patience. Being honest in business. Spending time doing homework with your kids. There's nothing small. From a godly perspective, from the perspective of infinity, nothing's too small. No one and no thing is insignificant. Because from the perspective of infinity, not only is there nothing too great, there's nothing too small. And this is classic Judaism. Maimonides said this, and the Rebbe took it seriously. Maimonides says, meditate, envision a scale, right? Maimonides in the Laws of Repentance, Hilchos Tshuva. He says everyone should picture a scale. It's very interesting. Maimonides should give a visualization. Picture a scale, and that scale is weighing the entire worth of the universe, of the world. And you should know, you, the individual, that one good action, one good word, one good thought can be the difference that tips the entire scale for the entire world to the side of salvation. That's Maimonides. The Rebbe took it literally. The Rebbe spent his life, 92 years, trying to convince every single man, woman, and child, Jewish and non-Jewish, that he met, that is real, and that you are the Rebbe, you are the Tzaddik, you are the Kohen Gadol, you are the world. What is a fitting tribute? What is a Kaddish for such? How do you thank somebody who not only believes in you more than you believe in yourself, but took the time to show it to you and convince you? What's the decent thing? How do you pay tribute to someone who believes in you that much? You know the only decent thing? The only response that makes sense is go out and own your greatness. Don't look to the left. Don't look to the right. Don't look at anybody else. You are the leader of world Jewry. This is what the Rebbe did with every single individual. And I promise you, from heaven, the Rebbe looks down and continues to see us this way. Because the Rebbe was never interested in being a great man. The Rebbe was only interested in the greatness of the person sitting across from him at that point. And I don't know if everyone met the Rebbe, and if you didn't, go to the Oihel. Go to the Rebbe's resting place. You're going to say, well, what's that going to do? Listen, I have no idea how the Rebbe did it in his lifetime. It doesn't make sense to me. You know the story of Gordon Sachs? He gave a big speech in 1968 to the United Jewish Appeal. He was a young, rich guy from Columbus, Ohio. And he gave this speech about we're going to raise $1 billion for Jewish education, some exorbitant number like that. And then later on, Rabbi Alevsky arranged the Yechidus with the Rebbe. So he met the Rebbe, 68, and he was a young guy. He was like 20 or something. Met the Rebbe, and they were speaking about Jewish education, about this endowment for Jewish education. And so 20, it actually was 69, because the next time he saw the Rebbe was in 1988, when the Rebbe Tzachai Mushka passed away. So he went to pay his respects. He went to the house on President Street, where the Rebbe and the Rebbe lived. And the Rebbe was sitting Shiva, and even when the Rebbe was in mourning, the Rebbe was giving out dollars. And the Rebbe was giving out dollars, meeting every single man, woman, and child who wanted to see it. And one of the people on the line was Gordon Sachs, who had met him 19 years ago. And Gordon Sachs gets to the Rebbe, the dollar line. You watch the video. This is, I mean, you think these are like Baal Shem Tov stories that, you know, it didn't happen. It could have happened. There's a video. Go Google. There's a video. Gordon Sachs gets up to his turn in line. The Rebbe looks at him for half a second and says, what are you doing for Jewish education? They hadn't spoken in 19 years. The Rebbe sees him for half a second. Right? And the first thing the Rebbe says, well, what are you doing for Jewish education? Gordon Sachs starts cracking up and he's like, this is amazing. I haven't spoken to you in 19 years. He didn't think that I even knew who he was, let alone that they should pick up the conversation where they left off 19 years ago. So he sits cracking up and says to the person next to him, Rob, this is amazing. You're amazing. Says the Rebbe, you're amazing. The Rebbe says, what is the benefit to the community if I'm amazing? Who cares? Like, you want to be amazed with me? It's not the point. The point is, you had a job to do. We were speaking about what you're doing for Jewish education. How is that normal? How is that normal that the Rebbe was able to see somebody for half a second and know instantly who they were? I can only describe it as an neshama. It's a spiritual thing. Not a normal thing. There was a kid who was in an orphanage in Paris during the war. These were children whose parents were murdered in the Holocaust or were running from the Holocaust. And there was a little kid who was in an orphanage. And this is documented. There's a video of him speaking about this. They had a stranger who used to visit the orphanage. They didn't know his name. They just called him Monsieur. Mr. Monsieur used to come and give them chocolate. 40 years later, this guy grows up. He's not a Lubavitcher. He lives in another community. He was at a wedding. He was visiting. So he decided to go into the Rebbe. He goes into the Rebbe. 40 years later, the Rebbe looks at him and says, Duvidel. He's like, what's wrong? Who's Duvidel? Oh, when I was a little kid, they called me Duvidel. How did the Rebbe see a guy 40 years later and recognize him as the little 5-year-old in the orphanage? Again, it's a neshama thing. I can't explain it any other way. It's a spiritual connection. So just like I can't explain how it worked when you go to 770 Eastern Parkway, I can't explain how it works if you go to the oil. You go to the Rebbe's resting place. But I can say this, and I'll leave you with this last story. When you go to the oil, you will meet much more than a great man. You will meet yourself. And this is the last thing I'll tell you. One of my teachers in yeshiva, he was lucky. When he was a 13-year-old, a little bar mitzvah bacher, and this was in the good old days, this is the early days of Lubavitch, every little bar mitzvah boy had yechidus, had a one-on-one meeting with the Rebbe. So when he was, I told you the story the first time with the oil, right? Huh? Yeah, I'm talking. Told you this, right? So Shlomo Zaki, one of my teachers in yeshiva, when he was 13, this is when I take the oil, I always tell them, this is the first thing. Because people say, well, how do you write? What do you do? What are the customs? I say, I'll answer you after, if you still want to know after I tell you the story. So the story I always tell is one of my teachers in yeshiva. When he was 13 years old, he went into the Rebbe, went into the Rebbe's room, have a one-on-one audience. And so before he goes in, he asks his teacher, Rabbi Shais Taub. A lot of people know it's one. He was the Rebbe's oral scribe. He used to people teachings, memorize teachings, repeat them. So this 13-year-old asks his teacher, when I go into the Rebbe, how should I conduct myself? Wie soll ich sich fühlen? How should I conduct myself? So I don't know if you know the Russian style, but it's very like sharp. So Rabbi says to the teacher, says to the kid, forget it, I'll go instead of you. So he's like, whoa. I'm just asking, when I go into the Rebbe, I want to know how to behave myself. What should I do? He says, yeah, that's right, I'll go instead of you. He's like, I'm just asking, when I go to the Rebbe, how do I behave myself? He says, yeah, that's what I'm saying, I'll go instead of you. The kid says, I don't understand. So the teacher says, listen. This world is a world of falsehood. Not only is nothing as it seems, but no one is as they seem, including ourselves. We're false to our own selves. And in this world of falsehood, there's one place of truth where you are the real you. When you go to the Rebbe, you are the real you. And in the one place where you are the real you, you're asking me how I would behave? That's why I say I'll go instead of you. I don't know how it works. It's above my pay grade to understand the spiritual things. But I do know one thing. I know that the Rebbe devoted his entire life to the conviction that every single one of us is godly and great and powerful and can heal the entire world. And that the Rebbe insisted that whatever we may think of ourselves, that none of that is true. What we think, our fears and our anxieties and our addictions, no, that's not real. That's not the real you. You are a Rebbe, you're a tzaddik, you're a high priest. You're holy of holies. The Rebbe devoted his life to that. on the Rebbe's yard site, I think it would be a fitting thing, decent thing, for each of us take some tangible step in revealing our own greatness, in healing ourselves, healing the whole world. When we do, that should be the very last act that's required to tip the entire scales, to bring salvation, to bring Mashiach for the entire world.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Taub. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We are going to have Myri right now, so please join us. And again, just like we started, I want to wish you all well, wish you all be blessed for this special day of the outside, which is going to actually be on Moshe Shabbos and Sunday, and have only happiness, health in our lives, and everything that we need and want. Thank you so much, and good night.